begin at the beginning. It is spring, moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black, the cobbled streets silent, and the hunched quarters and rabbit's wood limping invisible down to the slow black, crow-black fishing boat bobbing sea. The houses are blind as moles, the moles see fine tonight in the snouting velvet dingles.
I saw on the doorstep a young man who really did seem to be remarkably small. He looked very frail indeed, and he used to really rather work on this by wearing sweaters 6 sizes too large.
He wanted to be pale and dying all the time, and he wanted to be long and sickly and green and all that. In point of fact, of course, he was square and small and not like the conventional idea of a poet at all.
His name was absolutely mad, you know. It was dreadful. A drunkard and a womanizer.
I've never seen my father drunk, ever.
He really loved sweets. Cradle used to put dolly mixtures round the bath, you know, to persuade him to get into the bath.
And all the people of the lulled and dumbfound town are sleeping now. To begin at the beginning.
Or to begin at the end.
I loved a man whose name was Dick. He was big as a barrel and 3 feet thick. And I loved
the end, this bit of it anyway, was what Dylan Thomas wanted more than anything. To be revered as the great Welsh poet of all time.
But the one I loved best, awake or asleep, was little Willie Wee, and he's 6 feet deep.
This is the churchyard in Larne, southwest Wales, Anglican church, where Dylan Thomas was buried on the 24th of November 1953. His wife, Caitlin, who survived him by more than 30 years, chose, in spite of their famously quarrelsome marriage, to be buried beside him.
Her name is on the other side of this cross, a simple memorial to them both.
It's the only thing he ever thought to do, yes. I thought the only thing he could do, he was, from the very start, he had just the one idea, the poems and the booze.
Tonight's arena starts with the death of a famous poet and traces a backwards life from the grave to the cradle.
My mother was very much against him going the last trip, and he went from a 3rd trip to a 4th trip, and for some reason, some devil sent him there in himself.
Light breaks where no sun shines, where no seas run, the waters of the heart push in their tides, and broken ghosts with glowworms in their heads, the things of light, file through the flesh where no flesh decks the bone.
The end for Dylan Thomas began 3,000 miles away in a blue-collar tavern in Lower Manhattan. Between 2 and 3:30 a.m. on the morning of November the 3rd, 1953, in this bar, Dylan Thomas consumed 18 straight whiskies. That's 18 English doubles rather than 18 English singles. He died 6 days later of what one doctor described as this severe insult to the brain. Does this story sound familiar to you? I myself have read it in no less an authoritative source than the Rough Guide to Britain. It does sound exactly the way this wild, drunken Welsh poet might have died. The trouble is, it's almost certainly completely untrue. There were people in the bar that night, and none of them remember him drinking anything like that amount. The phrase severe insult to the brain first surfaces in this book, Dylan Thomas in America, by John Malcolm Brinnin, the fountainhead of the Dylan Thomas myth. This is the poet as pulp fiction hero.
He had had enough of public performance, and enough even of his own exhibitionism. And in despair he said, "I've come to the melancholy conclusion that my health is totally gone. I've seen the gates of hell."
Now I am a man no more, no more, and a black reward for a roaring life, sighed the old ramrod, dying of strangers. Tidy and cursed in my dove-cooed room, I lie down thin and hear the good bells jaw.
On whirlwind tours from coast to coast, clowning outrageously, lionized, triumphant, yet miserable, he lectured, partied, drank, and read. But in New York one evening, desperate beyond all recall, he went to a bar where, by his own account, he downed 18 straight whiskeys.
This is the room in the Chelsea Hotel where his long, painful, lied-about death began. It was Brinnin who introduced Thomas to the Chelsea. Unbeknownst to his wife, Kathleen, he was sharing the room with Brinnin's assistant, Liz Rytell, the recipient of that boast about the 18 straight whiskies. Thomas's last days were stage managed by an unholy trinity of American admirers, Brinnin, Rytell, and this man. Milton Feltenstein was a pill doctor with a lucrative practice in Gramercy Park. Without taking blood or urine samples, he'd been giving the possibly diabetic poet injections of cortisone, benzedrine, and morphine. Feltenstein was notoriously coy about quantities. Indeed, he refused to discuss his treatment of the poet right up until his own death. But there's no doubt at all about the last shot he gave Dylan Thomas. It was half a grain of morphine, enough, under the circumstances, to send him into